into Capernaum, and he's going to jump right back into his ministry of healing. In this instance, in chapter 7, we're covering the first 10 verses. Jesus heals a centurion servant. In this instance, Jesus is sought out by a quite particular person, an interesting character introduced to us, this Roman centurion. On behalf of his sick servant, Jesus is sought. His services are being pursued for his ability to heal. The reputation of Jesus as a healer has spread through Capernaum and into other regions, so much so even as the Sermon on the Plain. If you remember, kind of in the introductory portion of the Sermon on the Plain, Jesus healed all those who came to him from Syria and from Jerusalem and Judea and from various places. People had come out to hear Jesus preach. Tyre and Sidon. I was blanking on that second name. Up from the Mediterranean portion, north of Capernaum, here down and up from Jerusalem and Judea. So the reputation of Jesus as a healer is expanding. But this quite an interesting situation when a Roman centurion seeks your aid. I think this is very fascinating. So follow along with me as I read the first 10 verses of Luke chapter 7, and then we'll go back and look at these verses together individually. It says, after he had finished all his sayings in the hearing of the people, essentially at the sermon he had just been preaching, he entered Capernaum. Now a centurion had a servant who was sick and at the point of death, who was highly valued by him. When the centurion heard about Jesus, he sent him elders of the Jews, asking him to come and heal his servant. And when they came to Jesus, they pleaded with him earnestly, saying, he is worthy to have you do this for him, for he loves our nation, and he is the one who built our synagogue. And Jesus went with them. When he was not far from the house, the centurion sent friends, saying to him, Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. Therefore I will not presume to come to you, but say the word, and let my servant be healed. For I too am a man set under authority, with soldiers under me. I say to one, go, he goes, and to another, come, and he comes, and to my servant, do this, and he does it. When Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him. And turning to the crowd that followed him, he said, I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such faith. And when those who had been sent returned to the house, they found the servant well. At first glance, reading through this text, it seems like a very compelling story, certainly, but not all that uncommon, because Jesus kind of operates his earthly ministry in such a fashion. He is a healer. He is a healer. That was one of the signs of Jesus' ministry, especially early on, is to validate that he was the Messiah sent from God, as detailed and described. Remember, the whole premise to Luke's gospel, I think, is found in the early chapters of Jesus' ministry, when he is when he's in Nazareth speaking in the synagogue, and he quotes from Isaiah. To heal the sick, to raise the dead, to set the captives free. That really, Jesus' reading of Isaiah 62 back in earlier in Luke, set the stage for who Jesus was, and these are the marks from which you can use to validate who Jesus is. Remember, at the end of that, he folded up and he said, this prophecy, this word is fulfilled today in your hearing. Jesus is essentially saying, I'm the guy Isaiah is speaking of here. And if you recall, upon hearing that, his fellow neighbors and friends of his childhood there in Nazareth marched him to the edge of the cliff and wanted to hurl him off the side of a cliff and kill him. But they were, obviously that was unsuccessful. Jesus remembered. But I believe everything that we are reading in Luke is prefaced on that Isaiah prophecy, and Jesus reading that publicly, launching his public ministry. So these are the marks from which you can use to validate that I am who I say I am. He's healing, he's preaching. And he just got done preaching and healing there on the hillside of the Sea of Galilee. Now he's back in Capernaum, and the first opportunity that he's going to have once he's back in town is for healing. There is a need here, obviously. The centurion has a servant. There's a request for help. Jesus is seemingly willing to meet the need, and ultimately the need will be met. So this story, though on its surface, as you're just reading through it, it has compelling aspects of it. But when you get into the details of this story, we need to see there is so many really important aspects of what's taking place here in these 10 verses. So I want to kind of slowly work through each of these verses to understand the magnitude of what is taking place in this incredible event of the centurion's servant being healed. Now, we've already kind of covered the fact Jesus had previously been out near the Sea of Galilee. He's preaching. Now he returns back to his hometown. And upon his arrival, it seems like almost immediately here, if you follow Luke's narrative, almost immediately as he walks back into the city, after he had finished saying these things, he's just coming back into the city. He is approached by some Jewish elders that have been sent on behalf of this Roman centurion. Luke tells us that in verse 2 and 3, he says, now a centurion had a servant. The servant was sick. He was sick to the point of death. The descriptions, as it shows, this was a sick servant, but he was sick to the point of death. As to reiterate, he was very sick. But also, in the second part of verse 2, he was highly valued by him. The servant or slave was highly valued by the centurion. The centurion, a Roman official, Roman leader, would be in charge of upwards of 100 or so soldiers. But this character here in the story isn't presented to us as one of his soldiers, is it? It's presented to us as one of his servants, which another way to say it, this is one of his slaves. This is just the people assigned to him to do whatever he wants them to do. These aren't military men ready for battle. A servant might be the person who cooks. It might be the person who cleans. It may be an aid in some other fashion. But understand what the request is here. And the thoughts behind the centurion's request is, I have a sick servant, very sick, sick unto death, and I highly value him. I highly value him. That's no small detail. It reveals to us a little bit about the personality and the character of this Roman centurion. I don't know about you, when I picture Roman centurions, most of the time, I picture very strong men, very determined men, militant. We kind of, our mind goes more towards the crucifixion of Christ, where the centurions were the guards, they were the enforcers, they were the ones that came out to arrest Jesus. It was the Roman centurions that were, and the soldiers that were punching Jesus and mocking Jesus and placing a crown of thorns on. That's kind of the Roman centurion picture in Judeo-Christian usually doesn't paint a very pretty picture of a Roman centurion. They are both most of the time viewed in a very negative sense. But yet here in Luke's gospel, we're presented a Roman centurion that doesn't meet that script. He doesn't meet that identity. He seems to be exceptional. Seems to be different. Verse 3, when the centurion heard about Jesus, again the reputation of Jesus had gone out, he sent elders of the Jews asking him to come and heal his servant. So the centurion here seems to be a devout man. He seems to be a kind, humble man. Yet, all the same, he certainly was a centurion. He was a Gentile, a Roman soldier. But even more, he's an instrument of Israel's oppression. Israel was under the oppression of the Romans. Israel at this point is not even a nation anymore. Rome controls Israel. Rome controls Jerusalem, to Judea, Samaria, Jerusalem, the capital city of the former southern kingdom of Judah, and Samaria, the capital of the northern kingdom of Israel. All of that is under Roman control at this point, and Romans are taxing them, oppressing them. If we go back to the story of Levi, also known as Matthew, when Jesus called him to be a disciple of his and later on an apostle, that came with some negativity because the Jews didn't even like Jews who worked with Romans. Jews despised Jews. Matthew, as a tax collector, was in cahoots with the Roman government. And the Jews, not only the fellow Jews there, but the family members of Matthew would despise him. And Jewish tax collectors were not even allowed to come to the synagogue because of their partnership with the Roman government. And here we see the opposite thing happening. This is working backwards. Now we have a Roman leader working through the Jews to reach Jews. So this is what is presented to us when the centurion hears about Jesus. He calls elders of the Jews to him. He doesn't send out Roman guards or Roman soldiers to go find Jesus. He calls Jewish elders, sends them to Jesus in Capernaum to go and ask him to come heal his servant. We should not just quickly pass over the details of this fascinating story. We need to understand there was real strife between Romans and Jews at this point. Real strife. There was religious strife. Though Romans didn't care all that much about religion, they didn't want the Jewish people to gain any momentum on any front. So the Romans would let the Jews kind of exercise their religion so long as it didn't become disruptive. Now, Jesus became a major disruptor in Jewish tradition, didn't he? In Jewish religion and Judaism. Nevertheless, there was a strife, religious strife, that existed between the Romans and the Jews. There were financial and economic strifes because Romans were the oppressor and the Jews were the oppressed. So this created a lot of friction between these two. There were certainly cultural differences that were nearly unreconcilable. The Jews wanted to practice their faith, but they also wanted to enjoy some of the economic benefits of a thriving economy, in which Romans helped to establish that. But the Romans, through taxation, really kept the Jews under their thumb. They could really control the Jews through their taxes, through their tax system. Not only just their living taxes, but also certain temple taxes. They would charge them for their religious practices as well. So why is it that we see this whole economy, this whole society seem to be divided, yet in this instance we see a coming together of groups that are radically opposed to one another? The Jews, the Jewish elders, are now seeking Jesus' help on behalf of a Roman centurion. That just doesn't seem to line up. This Roman centurion had obviously heard about Jesus' miraculous powers, found himself desperately in need of someone to tend to his diet. servant, which again creates another very interesting aspect of the servants, because of the story here, because Romans were notoriously cruel to their servants, to their slaves. That's what is implied here by the term servant, is slave. In fact, under Roman law, a master had the right to kill his slave. Not only did he have the right to kill his slave, it was actually expected that he would do so if the slave became ill or injured to the point where he could no longer work. From a slave to master standpoint, servant to master, your only benefit to me is what you can do for me. Can you perform a task? Can you do your job? If you are sick or ill and unable to perform your duties, you have no value to me. Rather than medically treating the slave, under Roman law, you had the right just to kill him. Because medical treatment, that could get expensive, right? You never know how long that could last. And the Romans didn't want to waste resources on tending to sick and ill slaves. They would just kill them. Cruel, right? We agree that's cruel. But on the other side of it is like, if we try to understand the mentality of the age, okay, it makes sense why they would do such a thing, but this Roman centurion here seems to be an exception to that rule. He wants what's best for his slave or his servant. Well, why would he do? Well, Luke has already kind of told us, because he highly values him. The latter part of verse 2. He doesn't view his servant as a commodity. He doesn't view him as someone that can easily be replaced. He values him. And if you value somebody, you want to care for their needs. And this servant was sick to the point of death. He highly valued his servant and sought help on his behalf. Again, this reveals to us a little bit more about the character of the Roman centurion. Perhaps he felt that Jesus would be more likely to respond if he sent to him fellow Jews. So the centurion calls upon, here in this case, Jewish elders to find Jesus and to bring him to his house to heal his servant. Now, the Jewish elders wasn't that all fond of Jesus at this point. He'd had some run-ins with the elders, the scribes, and the Pharisees, right? To the point that they begin to plot. How are they going to get rid of him? But if the Roman centurion, the Roman leader, comes to you and says, I want Jesus, you go get it. They're perhaps following a command, but what we're going to see in a minute, like, they're all in on this. They're all in on this. Pay special attention to the faith. Faith is really the key point of this story. It's the main point of this story is faith. But pay special attention to the way faith here is exhibited in the early stages of this story. It'll become fully in picture at the end when we recognize the faith of the centurion. But understand here at the beginning, the centurion has full confidence that if Jesus could be convinced to come to his house, his servant could be and would be healed. The request here, when he sends the Jews, the Jewish elders in verse 3 to find Jesus, understand that he doesn't say, hey, go ask Jesus if he wouldn't mind stopping by sometime. Come take a look at him. Or pray for him. Or give an opinion about the proper form of treatment. But the request is simple. Come and heal my servant. Come and heal my servant. This exhibit the fact that this Roman centurion, probably having never met Jesus, but just having heard about him, believed he could do it. Now, this Roman centurion, I'm thinking logically here, should have the very best resources, medically speaking, at his disposal in Capernaum. Perhaps they had tried and failed. I don't know. Whatever the case, he had arrived to the conclusion the only hope for the servant that he highly valued was Jesus. That's the conclusion that he came to. So much so that he would be willing to risk it all, his reputation, his standing with the Roman government. Not the emperor may not be too fond of this thing that's going on here. His relationship with the other Romans, his soldiers, people in his household, how are they going to view all of this? And then his working through the Jewish elders to get to Jesus. It's a lot of moving parts that are incredibly fascinating. We move on to verses 4 and 5. He says, and the story continues, and when they came to Jesus, these Jewish elders, they pleaded with him earnestly, saying, he is worthy to have you do this for him. For he loves our nation, and he is the one who built us our synagogue. Wow, even more interesting facts about this centurion. You notice what's happening here. The Jewish elders are collaborating with a Roman official to implore Jesus to perform a miracle. The Jewish elders are really selling the worthiness of this centurion to Jesus, possibly believing that Jesus would refuse to help on cultural basis or ethnic differences. Again, it's a Roman centurion. Would say Roman, but really is a Gentile, right? Non-Jew. Perhaps they believed that the only way Jesus would actually do the miracle is if they came as a representative, a Jewish representative, and pleaded with Jesus. And that's exactly what they did. They pleaded with him earnestly. You see, the idea here is that they're almost begging Jesus, right? See how Luke is kind of presenting this to us. They're pleading with him earnestly. He has to say, Jesus, please come do this. And this is what they say about the centurion. They say, he is a worthy man. He is worthy to have you do this for him. They're not talking about the servant that's needing healed. They're talking about the centurion that's asking, that's making the request. All right? They're pleading on behalf of the centurion. He is worthy of this favor. He's worthy for you to do this for him. He loves our nation, which is quite there's some irony in that statement, right? Because Israel's not even a nation anymore at this point. They're still a covenant people of God. And we'll see Jesus use this, it's referred to Israel here in a moment in these final verses, but what he's saying is he loves the Jews. He's friendly with us. Not only is he friendly with the Jews, but he's the one who built us our synagogue. How fascinating. Not only was this Roman leader compassionate towards his own slaves, he was friendly with the local Jewish leaders in Capernaum, but even more, he used his own wealth and resources in order to build the local Jewish synagogue. That's exactly what they are saying here. He loves our nation. He is the one who built us our synagogue. Well, how is he going to build that? He's going to either use the resources of Rome or his own personal wealth. However he's facilitating that or procuring that, the idea is that the Jews love this guy because he did for them something that no one else had done. He built them a synagogue here, place of worship. Well, Jesus is no stranger to this synagogue in Capernaum, right? In fact, in Luke chapter 4, Jesus is in that synagogue, and he's preaching, and he's teaching, and he heals a man with an unclean spirit in the very synagogue that this Roman centurion had built for them. So they're making a pretty strong case, right? He's highly valued, his servant. He's a worthy man. He's worthy of this. He loves our nation. And he built us our synagogue. It's likely that Jesus' power and works of Luke chapter 4 in this synagogue was the convincing factor for the centurion to reach out to him. The word was spreading. If you go back in chapter 4, or remember from chapter 4 and chapter 5, each time Jesus would perform these miracles, it would say the word would go out. It was growing in people hearing Jesus' ability to heal. It's fascinating to me here how the Jewish leaders are doing their best to portray this Roman leader as a helpful asset to the Jewish cause and deserving of this huge favor as some type of repayment or something for his generosity to the Jewish people. Do you hear the undertones of that? Jesus, this man has done a lot for us. We kind of owe him. He deserves it. He's worthy because of what he's done. I'm not saying that's the centurion's attitude. I'm saying that's the Jewish elders' attitude. Jesus. We kind of like him. He's been good to us. Will you do us a solid here? Will you do us a favor? He's worthy. Now, obviously, Jesus does not work on the favor system. Right? The favor system doesn't jive. It's not consistent with what Jesus had done with the demon possessed and the sick and the blind and all those healed. They deserve nothing. Jesus doesn't work on the favor system, but he is compassionate. And although he isn't compelled by emotion, he does reward faith. And apparently, whatever leading up to this point, certainly Jesus has incredible discernment given to him by God to understand exactly what the needs are. He can perceive thoughts and understand situations through and through. So it's not as if their words were compelling enough or they sold him on this to convince him, but Jesus was willing. Jesus was willing. Verse 6, and Jesus went with them, the Jewish elders. He's returning back. But when he was not far from the house, the centurion sent friends, saying to him, Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. Yet another curveball in the story. Just as Jesus is making his way to heal the centurion's servant, the Roman leader sends out his friends this time. He doesn't send out more Jewish elders, but rather low friends, other Romans likely, to essentially stop Jesus from coming all the way to his house. So the Jewish elders go and they convince Jesus to go back to his house. Jesus says yes, and he's going now. The centurion seems to have a change of heart. Sends back, not a change in what his needs are, but a change in how the method he wants to go about in order to address them. What's interesting is, again, as ambassadors, these friends of the centurion come out to meet Jesus, and when they meet Jesus, they address him as Lord. But don't misunderstand it. These aren't the words of the friends. This is the words of the centurion. This is the words of the centurion. This is a delegation sent out from the Roman centurion with a memo. Say this. And this is what he says. Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. Again, it's not the words of the friends. That's the words of the centurion. You could couple these two together. There's some verses in between. But I from the beginning, my servant that I highly value, speaking in the first person, though it was the Jewish elders conveying this message. Now to, Lord, don't trouble yourself, for I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. So in effect, he's referring to Jesus as Lord, which tells us everything we need to know about the kind of man he was. But you have to pause here to think as the Roman centurion seems to have pivoted a little bit in his desire or his want or his ask. He had asked Jesus to come to his house, and now he's pivoting from that. And the Jewish elders had just had this spiel about how worthy. This is the exact words they use. He's worthy. He's worthy of you to do this. They talked about how worthy the Roman centurion was to receive a miracle from Jesus, and now, in his own words, the centurion is saying he's not worthy to have Jesus come into his house. We stop here for a moment just to recognize how much Jesus values and appreciates humility. If he wanted to, the Roman centurion probably could have ordered Jesus to come to his house and heal his servant. He doesn't need to ask. If he's the centurion in Capernaum, based on the size of Capernaum, my guess is he's the lead dog of the Roman official in the city. And with that kind of power and with that kind of authority, he could have said to his soldiers, "Go get me Jesus." And Jesus would have possibly had no say in the matter. He could have been forced to come and to heal. That's not what happened, of course. That's not what happened. He sends Jewish delegation first. Jesus agrees. Then he sends out some friends and says, "You know what? Never mind. Don't come. I'm not even worthy to have you in my house." He asked Jesus, and Jesus responded and said yes. He then rescinded his invitation because he felt unworthy to have Jesus in his household. Friends, that is exactly the type of attitude that Jesus loves. The type of attitude that says, I'm asking too much of you. I'm imploring too much of you. And understanding when him saying I'm not worthy, this is displaying an attitude that is so incredible for a Roman centurion, let alone for anybody to have. This had to be to the surprise of the Jewish elders, right? They had to be thinking, wait a second here. We risk our own reputation in order to go and talk to Jesus on your behalf, and now you kind of turned all of this whole thing on its head. This man does not rescind his request. He just believes Jesus doesn't have to be present to heal. Here's another faith component there. Not only does he believe Jesus can heal, he doesn't believe Jesus has to be present to heal. That's the idea here. He's not going to rescind his request. We'll see. But what he's saying is, I'm not worthy to have you in my house. Verse 7 and 8. Therefore, I did not presume to come to you, but just say the word. It says this again, the centurion continued to speak here. Just say the word, and let my servant be healed. For I too am a man set under authority, with soldiers under me, and I say to one, go, and he goes. And to another, come, and he comes. And to my servant, do this, and he does it. The centurion seems to understand something that seemingly no one else in Israel understands at this point. He's saying, you don't have to be here. You don't have to come to my house. Just say the word. Just say the word and it'll be done. What a remarkable statement. This man recognizes the power and the authority of Jesus. Jesus doesn't have to be present to execute his power. He can speak it and it'll happen. Simply, all Jesus has to do is say the word and it'll be done. That's how much power and authority. And the Romans actually saying, I understand it because I too am a man of authority. I can say to this one to go, and to that one come, and to that one go do this, and they have no option but to do it. If they refuse to do it, they're at risk of discipline. So they do it every time. That's what the Roman official is saying. I have that kind of authority, but as that's transferred to Jesus, he's saying, I believe you have that same type of authority in the spiritual realm. Whatever you say will be done. This is the type of faith and the type of belief that he had in Jesus. Verse 9, when Jesus heard these things, this memo from the centurion through his friends, he marveled at him. And turning to the crowd that followed him, he said, I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such faith. And when those who had been sent, his friends and Jewish elders that had been sent, returned back to the house, they found the servant well. Jesus was impressed by the faith of this centurion, such faith not found in all of Israel. Faith possessed by a Gentile, Roman leader. Jesus says, I've never seen anything like it. Never seen this kind of faith before in all of Israel. And he had spent some time there, obviously. He'd had some following. He had some disciples, apostles, and others that had followed him. He had been in Jerusalem on multiple occasions. He had seen some things. He'd been through some. His ministry is well in full effect at this point. Yet for Jesus to make this statement speaks volumes about the character and the promise of a future covenant between the Jew and Gentile. Jesus said, I've never seen such great faith in all of Israel. It's incredible. But this statement is really twofold, isn't it? It's an incredible compliment to the Gentile leader, Roman centurion, but it's an incredible indictment to all the Jews of the covenant people of Israel. Such faith not found in all of Israel. On a few occasions, Jesus marveled, as Luke describes here, as he looked upon people. In this instance, he marveled at the faith of a Gentile in charge of carrying out the oppression of the people of Israel, right? On another occasion, Mark chapter 6 to be exact, Jesus marveled at Israel's unbelief. There's a point in Jesus' ministry where we'll also look upon Israel, and he'll weep. He'll weep over Israel. Israel, Israel, how I've longed to gather you as a hen does its chicks, but you were unwilling, is what he'll say. He marveled at the faith of the centurion. He also marveled at the unbelief of his people, Israel. But not even in Israel have I found such faith. That statement hits hard. It's impactful. Now, Jesus did, in fact, heal the centurion's servant, and in doing so, he affirmed the faith of the centurion, certainly, and all others involved, but he also displayed the fact that he truly does have spiritual authority over all things. Whether sickness or disease, in some cases demonic oppression, and even in some cases death. Jesus, because we're going to get into a very next story, beginning in verse 11, Jesus is going to raise the dead. Jesus has power over everything. Everything. That power is unmatched, but it's also unrecognizable to many. The centurion seemed to see it. He saw what few others could see through eyes of faith, really. Spiritual, because faith it's the evidence of things what? That you can't see. Faith is evidence of things you can't see. The centurion saw something with eyes of faith that no one else was seeing at this point, or very few people were seeing at this point, and he acted upon it. At risk of his reputation, of his career, maybe even his own life. He was willing to risk it all for a slave because he highly valued him. Man, that speaks volume about the Jesus doesn't care about what ethnicity you are or what heritage you're from. He looks at the heart. Both Jew and Gentile. He doesn't care about where you came from. Socioeconomics, power, clout, success doesn't mean anything to you. Jesus doesn't mean anything to him. He looks at the heart. The centurion had a heart that Jesus wanted to bless and healed his servant. Jesus' power far exceeds anything of this natural world. That's why he is truly the King that is above all kings and the Lord above all lords. Amen? Let me pray for us. Father, we thank you for this time together, and we thank you for your word here in Luke 7. Thankful for this story, how it gives us so much to reflect on, our own faith, our confidence in you to reach out to you, to rely upon you, to forego our own pride, to be humble, to ask things of you that seem big to us but are easy for you. Lord, give us help to and faith to rely completely upon you and your power and through the work of your Son Christ in our life to meet our needs and God, to carry us through the things that are incredibly difficult. At times that we are desperate, you are faithful and you will continue to be. I pray that you would be with each of us as we go throughout our week this week, Lord, that your word would direct our thoughts and our actions and our words, and that we would bring honor and glory to you, our King. And I pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, we'll have just a few minutes here to kind of transition. If you would like to hang around for business meeting,